The sound of the store's alarm ripped through the quiet evening like a sharp blade. All eyes turned toward the woman bolting through the automatic doors, clutching a small package close to her chest. Her face was a mixture of fear and guilt, her footsteps uneven as she tried to run while cradling her bundle. "Stop her!" someone yelled from inside the store, but no one moved. The woman barely made it 10 steps outside before an older woman, surprisingly swift for her age, intercepted her. "Young lady," the old woman said sternly, her sharp eyes narrowing as she grabbed her arm. "You're not going anywhere." The woman froze, panting heavily. Her grip on the package tightened, and tears brimmed in her wide, terrified eyes. For a moment she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "I didn't have a choice." The store owner, known to everyone as Mrs. Bernice, had seen her share of desperate people in her years running the corner store. But there was something about this young woman, her trembling hands, the wild look in her eyes, the desperation in her voice, that gave Bernice pause. She glanced down at the package in the woman's arms, a small pack of diapers. The cold wind seeped through the cracks in the old apartment windows, biting at Emily's fingers as she wrapped a threadbare blanket tighter around her shivering baby. Lily's cries had subsided into soft whimpers, but the hunger in her daughter's weak, fragile body was evident. Emily sat on the worn-out couch, staring blankly at the peeling wallpaper on the opposite wall, her mind racing as the weight of her circumstances crushed her. It had been 3 weeks since she was let go from her waitressing job at the diner. Business had slowed, and Emily, as the newest hire, was the first to be cut. She'd begged her manager for extra shifts, for even a chance to work on weekends, but the restaurant couldn't afford to keep her. "You're a hard worker, Emily," the manager had said apologetically, handing her the final paycheck. "But times are tough for everyone. I wish I could do more." That paycheck was gone now, spent on overdue rent, a small bag of groceries and a box of formula. She hadn't bought diapers that week, thinking she could stretch what she had, but the last one was now in Lily's bassinet, barely holding together. Her stomach growled audibly, a sharp reminder that she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. She had a single can of soup in the cupboard, but she was saving it for Lily, though she wasn't sure how even that would help her baby. Formula was gone too. She'd spent all morning calling potential employers, but most didn't answer, and those who did told her the same thing: "We're not hiring right now." Defeated, she sank into the couch, holding Lily close. The baby's tiny fingers clutched at her shirt, and Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mommy's trying. I promise I'll fix this." The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of traffic outside. Emily looked down at her baby, her beautiful, innocent child, and a thought crossed her mind. It was a thought she'd buried before, a thought she hated herself for even entertaining. What if I took what we need? Her breath hitched. She shook her head violently, trying to push the idea away. She wasn't that kind of person. She had always believed in hard work, in doing things the right way. But what good were principles when your child was starving? She stood up abruptly, pacing the tiny living room. Her eyes fell on the corner of the room where a box of Lily's old clothes sat. She'd already sold everything of value: her phone, her microwave, even her wedding ring from a marriage that had ended before Lily was born. The clothes were all that remained, but they wouldn't fetch much, and Lily might still need them. Her chest tightened and she sank to her knees. She felt trapped, like she was sinking into quicksand and couldn't claw her way out. A knock at the door startled her, and she scrambled to her feet, clutching Lily protectively. She opened the door cautiously to find her landlord standing there, his expression stern. "Emily," he said, his tone clipped. "It's the 10th. Rent was due 5 days ago." "I know," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I'm working on it. I just need a little more time." The landlord sighed, clearly unimpressed. "I've been patient, but I have bills to pay too. If you don't have the money by the end of the week, I'll have no choice but to start the eviction process." Emily's heart sank. "Please, just a few more days. I promise I'll have it." He frowned but nodded begrudgingly. "Friday, Emily. No later." As he turned to leave, Emily closed the door and leaned against it, her knees buckling. She slid to the floor, clutching Lily tightly. Friday. How was she supposed to come up with that kind of money by Friday? Her gaze fell on her daughter's empty formula container. The thought she'd been suppressing all day resurfaced, stronger this time. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. She had no plan, no solution, and every second that ticked by felt like a countdown to disaster. She thought about her mother, who had died when Emily was 15, leaving her to navigate life on her own. Her mother had always told her, when life knocks you down, you get back up and fight. But how do you fight when every option seems closed off? By morning, Emily had made up her mind. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered into the cold air, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't know what else to do." She bundled Lily in her warmest blanket, kissed her softly on the forehead, and placed her in the bassinet. Then she grabbed her coat, her heart pounding in her chest. She hated herself for what she was about to do, but desperation had swallowed her whole. The corner store wasn't far from her apartment. It was a small place, run by an elderly woman Emily had seen a few times in passing. She walked there slowly, her mind racing. Maybe she'd just ask for help. Maybe the woman would take pity on her. But when she reached the store and stepped inside, her courage faltered. The shelves were neatly stocked, the smell of fresh bread wafting through the air. A few customers milled about, but no one paid her any attention. Emily's eyes darted to the baby supplies aisle. She saw the diapers first, then the formula. Her heart pounded as she walked toward them, her hands trembling. Just ask, she told herself. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she grabbed a small pack of diapers and hugged it to her chest. She looked around, her throat dry. No one seemed to notice her. She took a step toward the exit, her legs shaking. Just as she crossed the threshold, the alarm blared. The sound froze her in place and she panicked, bolting for the door. She didn't get far before a firm hand grabbed her arm, and she turned to see the old woman staring at her with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Stop," the woman said, her voice sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" And in that moment, Emily's fragile resolve shattered. Emily stood frozen in place, the sharp sound of the store's alarm still echoing in her ears. Her heart pounded violently as she clutched the pack of diapers against her chest. Like a lifeline. The cold evening air burned her lungs, and her legs felt like they would give out at any moment. The old woman who had grabbed her arm stared at her with piercing eyes, her grip surprisingly strong for someone her age. She was a petite woman, her white hair tied into a neat bun, her posture erect and commanding. There was no mistaking her authority. She wasn't just a passerby. She was the owner of the store. "Turn around and come inside," the woman said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Emily shook her head instinctively, her eyes wide with panic. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to what?" the old woman interrupted, her expression stern. "You didn't mean to steal?" Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her hands trembled as she loosened her grip on the diapers, the weight of guilt pressing down on her. The old woman sighed, her eyes softening just a fraction. "Come inside," she said again, this time with less harshness. "We'll talk there." Feeling the stares of onlookers, Emily nodded meekly and allowed herself to be guided back into the store. Her face burned with humiliation as she avoided meeting anyone's gaze. She felt like the lowest of the low, a thief caught in the act. Inside, the store was eerily quiet. The other customers watched the scene with a mix of curiosity and judgment, but the old woman shot them a sharp look, and they quickly went back to their shopping. She led Emily to the corner of the store, near the register, and gestured for her to sit on a small stool. Emily sat down, her knees shaking. She kept her head down, staring at the floor as tears began to stream down her face. "What's your name?" the old woman asked, folding her arms. "Emily," she stammered, barely audible. "And why did you steal from my store, Emily?" Emily couldn't bring herself to look up. She clutched her hands together, her knuckles white. I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. My baby." Her voice broke and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing. The old woman studied her closely, her expression softening as she noticed Emily's ragged clothes, her sunken cheeks, and the desperation in her voice. She crouched down to Emily's level, her tone gentler now. "You have a baby?" she asked. Emily nodded, wiping her tears with trembling fingers. "She's just 3 months old," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I lost my job. I've been trying to find work, but no one's hiring. I don't have anyone to help me. I ran out of formula and I couldn't even afford diapers. I didn't know what else to do." For a long moment, the old woman said nothing. Her sharp eyes softened into something Emily couldn't quite place. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. "What's her name?" the old woman asked softly. "Lily," Emily said, her lips trembling. The old woman sighed deeply, standing up. "Stay here," she said firmly, walking away toward the baby supplies aisle. Emily's stomach twisted as she watched her leave. She wondered if the woman was calling the police, or if she'd simply throw her out of the store and ban her forever. Either way, she knew she deserved it. A few minutes later, the old woman returned, holding a small plastic bag. She set it down on the counter and turned to Emily. "Here," she said. Emily blinked in confusion. "What?" The woman pointed to the bag. "There's a pack of diapers and a container of formula in there. Take them and go home to your baby." Emily's jaw dropped. I don't understand," she stammered. "You're not calling the police?" The woman's expression turned stern again, but her voice was steady. "No, I'm not. But listen to me, Emily. Stealing is not the answer. Do you hear me?" "Yes," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face again. "There is greater honor in asking for help than in taking what doesn't belong to you," the woman continued. "If you had come to me and explained your situation, I would have helped you without hesitation. But now you've put yourself in this position and you've scared yourself half to death in the process." "I'm so sorry," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know." The woman held up a hand to stop her. "Apologies are good, but actions matter more. Promise me, Emily, that you'll never do this again." "I promise," Emily said earnestly. The old woman nodded, her expression softening once more. "Good. Now go home and take care of your baby. And if you ever find yourself in need again, come to me. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, clutching the bag to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. The old woman gave her a faint smile. "Go on now. And take care of yourself too. Your baby needs you strong." As Emily walked out of the store, her heart was a tangled mess of gratitude, shame, and relief. She looked back once before stepping into the cold evening air, seeing the old woman watching her with an unreadable expression. It was a moment Emily would never forget, one that would stay with her for the rest of her life. 3 days had passed since Emily's desperate act at the corner store. She had stayed inside her tiny apartment since, too ashamed to face the world. The diapers and formula the store owner, Mrs. Bernice, had given her were a lifeline, but the guilt weighed on her heavily. On the third evening, unable to calm her restless mind, Emily bundled Lily in her blanket and decided to take a walk. She wandered aimlessly through the neighborhood, ending up across the street from the corner store. She sat on a cold, metal bench, staring at the store's glowing sign. She wasn't sure why she was there. Maybe it was the pull of unfinished business, the nagging need to apologize once more. Or maybe she just wanted to see the kind woman who had shown her undeserved grace. As she sat lost in thought, Lily cooing softly in her arms, a shadow loomed over her. "You again?" a familiar voice said, tinged with curiosity. Emily flinched, looking up to see Mrs. Bernice standing before her, her arms crossed but her expression unreadable. I wasn't going to steal anything," Emily stammered, panic creeping into her voice. Bernice raised an eyebrow. "I didn't accuse you of that. But what are you doing here, lurking around with a baby in the cold?" Emily looked down, her cheeks burning with shame. "I don't know," she admitted. I just felt drawn here." Bernice sighed and sat down on the bench beside her, her sharp gaze softening as she glanced at Lily. "You're not in trouble, Emily? But you shouldn't be out here like this. What's going on?" Emily hesitated, then said softly, "I've been trying to find a job. I've called everywhere I can think of, but no one's hiring. I'm scared. I don't know what else to do." Bernice nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "It's tough out there," she said. "But sitting here feeling sorry for yourself won't change anything." Emily bit her lip, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm trying," she whispered. Bernice looked at her for a long moment, then placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "I can see that," she said. "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who needed a hand up, not a handout." Emily looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "My brother runs a factory a few miles from here," Bernice explained. "It's not fancy, but it's steady work. If you're willing to put in the effort, I can get you an interview." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "You'd do that for me?" Bernice smiled faintly. "Everyone deserves a second chance. But remember what I told you, there's greater honor in asking for help than in stealing. Do you understand?" Emily nodded quickly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand. Thank you. I'll never forget this." Bernice patted her shoulder. "Good. Now go home and get some rest. You'll need your strength." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. Holding Lily close, she stood up, her heart full of gratitude as Bernice watched her walk away into the night. The following week, Emily found herself standing outside a bustling factory, her nerves frayed but her heart cautiously hopeful. It was Mrs. Bernice who had orchestrated this opportunity, leveraging her connection with her brother, Mr. Harold. Emily didn't want to let either of them down. Just be honest and work hard, Bernice had told her before the interview. You'll be surprised how far that can take you. Inside the office, Harold was a no-nonsense man with a sharp gaze but a kind demeanor. He asked her about her skills, her previous work experience, and what had brought her here. Though her hands shook and her voice wavered, Emily answered truthfully, admitting her struggles without making excuses. I don't have much, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. But I'm willing to learn and I'll work as hard as I can. Harold leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment before nodding. We need people in packaging, he said. It's fast-paced and tough but it pays weekly. Think you can handle that? Emily's heart leapt. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. As she walked out of the factory with a start date for the following Monday, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, pride. That evening she visited Mrs. Bernice to share the good news. You were right, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. Asking for help was so much harder than stealing. But it feels right. Bernice smiled, her eyes warm. It always does, my dear. And now you're on a path to something better. Just remember you're stronger than you think. From that moment on, Emily's life began to shift. The job wasn't easy and the hours were long, but each paycheck brought security and a renewed sense of dignity. It wasn't just a turning point in her circumstances, it was a turning point in how she saw herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rebuilding. A year later, Emily stood outside the same corner store, now with a smile on her face instead of desperation in her heart. Lily, now toddling on wobbly legs, clutched her mother's hand tightly, giggling at the world around her. Emily had just finished a shift at the factory, where she'd been promoted to a team lead. The steady income had allowed her to move into a better apartment, one with reliable heat and a safe place for Lily to play. As she stepped inside the store, she saw Mrs. Bernice behind the counter, her sharp eyes lighting up as she recognized them. Well, look who it is, Bernice said with a wide smile. Emily picked up Lily, who squealed in delight, and walked over to the counter. I just wanted to stop by and say thank you, Emily said warmly. For everything. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't helped me. Bernice waved her hand dismissively, though her eyes shone with pride. You did the hard part, my dear. You took the chance to change your life. I just gave you a nudge. Emily placed a small gift bag on the counter, her cheeks pink. It's not much, but I wanted you to have this. Bernice opened the bag to find a beautifully knitted scarf in rich, warm colors. Her fingers brushed the soft material as she smiled. Did you make this? Emily nodded. I've been teaching myself in the evenings. It helps me relax. Bernice draped the scarf around her neck, beaming. It's lovely, Emily. Thank you. As Emily left the store, holding Lily close, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope for the future. She had learned that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a step toward strength. And she vowed to be the kind of person who would offer that help to someone else when the time came. From the store window, Bernice watched them go, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She had seen many people walk through her doors over the years, but few had touched her life like Emily and Lily had. And in that moment she knew she had done the right thing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by liking this video, share and subscribe to our channel. Also turn on the post notification bell so that you will be notified each time we post a story.